Welcome to our guide on managing user language preferences in Active Directory using PowerShell and group policy. In this video, we're going to cover everything you need to know to set up a language-specific environment for your users, making their Windows experience more user-friendly and efficient. Let's get started. Before we dive into the configuration steps, let's go over a few prerequisites. Here's what you'll need to follow along in this setup. A working Active Directory setup with user accounts. If you haven't set up Active Directory yet, check out our previous post on setting up Active Directory on server 2022. Group policy management. You will need 3 GPOs in this case for French, English and Dutch. And for an introduction to group policy, including templates, I will refer to our group policy templates and preferences guides. Next, we will need security groups. In this case, you will need 3 security groups corresponding to each language. User policy language French, English and Dutch. And last but not least, we will need some PowerShell access, because you will be running a PowerShell script on your Active Directory server. Now that we have this covered, let's take a look on how to set up each user languages in Active Directory. This is important because it allows us to automate language settings across the organization. You can set the preferred language attribute manually for each user in Active Directory users and computers, or ADUC, and here's how you do it. Open ADUC and locate the user. Right-click the user and select Properties. Go to the Attribute Editor tab and find the preferred language attribute. Click Edit and enter the appropriate language code, like in ENUS, or for English, or NLBE or NLNL for Dutch. Click OK to save your changes. If you don't see the attribute editor, don't worry, just go to View and select Advanced Features. Alternatively, if you want to update the preferred language attribute for multiple users, PowerShell is a great option. You can use PowerShell to set this attribute for a single user, or for a batch of users using a CSV file. Once you have set up the preferred language attribute, it's time to create group policy objects, or GPOs, to enforce language settings. We'll be creating separate GPOs for English, Dutch and French. Let's start by opening the Group Policy Management console on your domain controller. Navigate to your domain, right-click on Group Policy Objects and select New. Name each GPO based on the language, like User Policy Language Engels for English, User Policy Language NL for Dutch, and User Policy Language FR. I've already created my policies right here. Now edit each GPO to configure regional options based on the target language. Here's how. Navigate to User Configuration, Policies, Administrative Template, Control Panel, and Regional and Language Options. Double-click Restrict selection of Windows menus in dialog language and set the state to Enable, and then choose a language. Click Apply and OK to save the settings, and configure these for each individual language. If you're also managing Microsoft Office language preference, you can set the Office display and editing language for each GPO. You can also do that by using the Group Policy Management. In the Group Policy Management editor for each language-specific GPO, navigate to User Configuration, Policies, Administrative, Microsoft Office 2016 and Language Preferences. Next, we need to link each GPO to the appropriate organizational units or UUs in Active Directory. To control which users receive each language policy, assign them to a language-specific security group. Create 3 groups in Active Directory, like like user policy language English, French, NL. Then update security filtering on each GPO to only apply to the corresponding group. Here's the game plan. We'll use the preferred language attribute in Active Directory to assign users to a specific language group, which in turn will link to a GPO for language settings. This way, as the user language changes, Active Directory will automatically handle the adjustments. Here's how it will work. We will pull all AD users who have a preferred language attribute set. We will determine for each user and extract the language code from that attribute. We'll assign them to the group based on their language code. And to avoid conflicts, we will make sure to remove them from all other groups. If a user's preferred language isn't set or isn't supported, we will remove them from all language groups. Here's the PowerShell script that does it all. This script should be saved as, for example, update user language groups. Save it on your Active Directory and run it as a scheduled task. To set up a scheduled task, open Task Scheduler and select Create New Task. Give it a name like User Language Group Update and set a trigger to be daily or weekly depending on your update needs. Set the action to run PowerShell executable with the arguments pointing to your script location. And configure the task to be run with the highest privileges. And use a service account that has permissions to modify Active Directory groups. In my example, I've chosen to run the task under administrator, but note that it's recommended to run scheduled scripts not as a domain administrator. Instead, create a dedicated not admin user account and delegate them. I've not covered this, but I've linked some articles on how to do this. Before rolling this out, test it on a few user accounts to make sure everything is working as expected. Assign a test value to the preferred language attribute for some sample users. And run the script manually and observe the output to verify users are being added to the correct group. And then check the group membership of test users in Active Directory to confirm the changes. And that's it. By setting up language-specific GPOs and automating user assignments with PowerShell, you can create a more personalized and efficient environment for your users. For more detailed instructions and PowerShell code snippets, check out the full blog post link below. Thanks again for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more automation tips.